My name is Jade Walker, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I would have to fight for my place in my own home. For decades, my son Thomas and I were inseparable until he married Amanda. I still remember the sting of her words at that party. "You don't belong here anymore. This is our house now. The house my late husband and I built with our own hands, the home I had generously opened to them." Little did she know I was about to remind her exactly whose name was on the deed. Before I continue with how this all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to deal with an ungrateful family member. Life has a funny way of teaching us lessons when we least expect them. After losing my husband Richard to cancer 10 years ago, I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. We had been high school sweethearts, married for 38 wonderful years. He was my rock, my partner, in everything. After his passing, I continued my career as a high school English teacher until retirement 3 years ago. Teaching Shakespeare in Austin to teenagers kept me connected to the world when grief threatened to isolate me. Through it all, my only son Thomas was my greatest joy. Even as a boy, he had his father's gentle eyes and my stubborn determination. We weathered the storm of grief together, after Richard passed, becoming even closer than before. Every Sunday, Thomas would drive over for dinner, and we would talk for hours about his work at the marketing firm in Boston, my garden projects, and the books we were reading. He would help me with house repairs, and I would send him home with enough leftovers to last the week. It was a comfortable routine that kept us connected, despite his busy life in the city. Then Amanda entered the picture. Thomas met her at his marketing firm where she worked in client relations. She was beautiful, ambitious, and 10 years younger than my son. The first time he brought her to Sunday dinner, I tried to be welcoming. She complimented my home, asked about my teaching career, and seemed interested in our family photos. But something felt off. I noticed how she subtly redirected Thomas whenever he and I fell into our usual banter. How her smile tightened when he mentioned childhood memories. How she checked her watch repeatedly throughout the meal. "She's just nervous to meet you," Thomas insisted later when I gently mentioned these observations. "Give her time to get comfortable with us." I wanted to believe him. I wanted my son to be happy. So I ignored the way she dismissed my opinions with a patronizing, "And that's sweet," or how she would touch Thomas's arm to silence him when he spoke too long about family matters. I overlooked how she steered conversations back to her career achievements or her extensive travel experiences that made our small-town life seem provincial by comparison. Their courtship moved at lightning speed. Within 6 months of dating, Thomas called me with news of their engagement. No formal proposal with the family heirloom ring I had offered. No discussion of their future plans. Just a quick decision made during a weekend trip to New York. "Are you sure this isn't too fast?" I asked cautiously, remembering how Richard and I had dated for 3 years before getting engaged. "When you know, Mom," Thomas replied with an enthusiasm that both warmed and worried my heart. "Amanda is exactly what I need in my life right now." What I needed in my life was more time to know the woman who would become my daughter-in-law. But the wedding planning left little opportunity for that. Amanda had a clear vision for their big day, one that seemed to have little room for traditional elements or family input. When I offered to help address invitations or suggested the family recipe for wedding cake that had been used for generations, Amanda would smile tightly and say, "We've got it covered, Jade." Not Mom, not even Mrs. Walker, just Jade, as though we were casual acquaintances rather than family. The wedding was beautiful, but impersonal. A trendy waterfront venue in Boston, signature cocktails, and a carefully curated guest list that seemed to include more of Amanda's business contacts than family friends. I sat in the front row alone, missing Richard more than ever, watching our son commit his life to a woman I barely knew. After the honeymoon, a new challenge emerged. Thomas and Amanda were struggling with Boston's outrageous housing market. Their combined salaries, impressive as they were, couldn't stretch to cover the type of home Amanda envisioned in the neighborhoods she deemed acceptable. "We're looking at apartments 45 minutes outside the city," Thomas confided during a rare solo visit. But Amanda's worried about the commute affecting her career advancement. I looked around my 4-bedroom colonial home, suddenly aware of how empty it felt with just me rattling around in it. The house Richard and I had built 30 years ago when land was affordable and interest rates reasonable. The home where Thomas had grown up with its spacious yard and finished basement that Richard had converted into a recreation room. It was far too much house for one aging woman. "Why don't you both stay here while you save for a place?" I offered impulsively. "The master bedroom on the main floor is mine, but you could take the entire upstairs. 3 bedrooms, the second bathroom. Plenty of privacy." Thomas's eyes lit up. "Really, Mom? You wouldn't mind?" "Of course not. This house was always meant for family. I imagined grandchildren someday running through these halls, bringing life back to the quiet corners. It would be temporary, of course. Just until you find the right place and save enough for a decent down payment, maybe 6 months or a year at most." When Thomas presented the idea to Amanda, I expected reluctance. After all, living with your mother-in-law isn't every young bride's dream. But to my surprise, she agreed almost immediately. "It's actually perfect timing," Thomas explained when they accepted. "Amanda just got a promotion that will mean longer hours, and this way she won't have to worry about household stuff while advancing her career." I should have recognized the warning in those words. I should have established clearer boundaries from the start. But in my eagerness to be close to my son, and to be the supportive mother I had always tried to be, I welcomed them with open arms and an open heart, never imagining how quickly those arms would be pushed away and that heart would be broken. The first weeks of our new living arrangement seemed promising. We established a routine quickly. Thomas and Amanda would leave early for work, and I would have the house to myself during the day. In the evenings, we would occasionally share meals in the dining room that had too rarely seen use since Richard's passing. Amanda even suggested a weekly movie night, which filled me with hope that perhaps we could become a close family unit after all. I gave them space, careful not to hover or impose. I wanted this arrangement to work for Thomas's sake as much as my own. The upstairs became their domain, while I kept to my bedroom, the kitchen, and my small reading nook in the sunroom. It seemed like a reasonable division of space that offered everyone privacy while allowing for shared family time. But by the third week, subtle shifts began to occur. I came home from my book club one afternoon to find the living room completely rearranged. The sofa that had always faced the fireplace now backed against the wall. The antique coffee table Richard had restored was replaced by a sleek glass one I had never seen before. Family photos that had lined the mantel were gone, replaced by minimalist art pieces. Amanda felt the room needed updating. Thomas explained when I asked about the changes. "Doesn't it look more modern now?" I swallowed my objections. "It's certainly different." The next day, I discovered my cookbooks had been boxed up and placed in the garage, replaced by shiny new appliances that crowded the counter space. My herb garden window now held Amanda's collection of designer water bottles. "Your cooking methods are so old-fashioned," Amanda commented when I searched for my grandmother's recipe box. "Nobody uses all those heavy creams and butters anymore. I've downloaded some amazing keto recipes you should try." Each time I raised concerns, they were dismissed with increasing firmness. "Mom, we need to find a balance here," Thomas said, after I discovered my late husband's favorite reading chair had been moved to the basement. "Amanda needs to feel this is her home too." "I understand that," I replied carefully. "But this has been my home for 30 years. Shouldn't there be some discussion before making changes?" The pattern continued. Amanda would alter something in my absence, Thomas would mediate the resulting tension, and I would ultimately concede to keep peace. When I suggested we sit down together and discuss household expectations, Amanda was always too busy, too tired, or heading out the door to meet friends. I tried to build a relationship with my daughter-in-law despite these challenges. I invited her to join my garden club, offered to teach her my recipes, suggested we volunteer together at the local animal shelter where I spent Tuesday afternoons. Each invitation was declined with a transparent excuse. "Gardening ruins my manicure. I don't really cook. Thomas and I prefer to order in. I'm allergic to cats and dogs, and basically all animals." When Thomas was home, Amanda was unfailingly polite if distant, but when he worked late, which happened with increasing frequency, her true feelings emerged. "Your decorating style is so dated," she remarked while I watered my houseplants. "This place looks like a grandma's house." "I am a grandma," I reminded her gently. "Or at least I hope to be someday." She grimaced as though the thought disturbed her. "Thomas and I aren't ready for kids. My career comes first. Besides, children are so messy and loud." One rainy Saturday I came downstairs to find Amanda on the phone in the kitchen, her voice carrying clearly, "Yes, it's just as bad as I expected. Doilies everywhere. Horrible floral wallpaper. And she hovers constantly asking about our day offering to make snacks like we're 12. She laughed. "Don't worry, we'll transform this place bit by bit. She won't even notice until it's completely different." I retreated upstairs, hurt burning in my chest. That evening I tried to discuss it with Thomas. I overheard Amanda talking about the house. I began cautiously. "I get the feeling she sees this as a complete remodeling opportunity rather than a temporary living situation." Thomas sighed heavily. "Mom, that's just how she is. Amanda has an eye for design. She's trying to help modernize the place." "But I didn't ask for help modernizing my home," I pointed out. "And some of these changes involve removing things that mean a lot to me." "Like what?" he challenged. "Like your father's books that were in the living room bookcase. Like the family photos that used to be on the mantel. Like the quilt your grandmother made that's now stuffed in the linen closet." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "Mom, you can't expect everything to stay the same forever. Amanda feels suffocated by all the history in this house." The conversation ended with my concession as always. But the next morning I discovered something that crossed a line I couldn't ignore. While looking for my winter sweaters as the weather turned colder, I went to the attic and found boxes of Richard's belongings that had been in our bedroom, his watch collection. The sweaters I still kept in the bottom drawer of our dresser. The cards and letters we had exchanged throughout our marriage. With shaking hands, I confronted Amanda that evening. Why were Richard's things moved to the attic? She barely looked up from her phone. "That bedroom is so cluttered. I was helping you organize." "Those things weren't clutter," I said, my voice breaking. "They were my husband's. They belong where they were." "Jade," she said with exaggerated patience, "holding on to a dead man's belongings isn't healthy. Thomas agrees it's time you moved on." The hurt was so acute I couldn't speak. I looked to my son, expecting him to defend me, to say he had said no such thing. Instead, he looked uncomfortable, caught between his wife and his mother. "Mom, maybe Amanda has a point. It has been 10 years. In that moment, I felt truly alone for the first time since Richard's death. My son, the boy I had raised with all the love in my heart, couldn't see how deeply this wounded me. The holiday season brought new tensions. Thanksgiving had always been my domain. I enjoyed preparing the traditional meal using recipes passed down through generations. But 3 weeks before the holiday, Amanda announced she had invited her parents, her sister and brother-in-law, and 2 of her friends from work to join us. "I've already ordered most of the meal from that gourmet market in town," she added. "Their food is amazing, and this way you won't have to work so hard in the kitchen." I tried to hide my disappointment. "I don't mind cooking. It's tradition." "Your traditions are lovely," Amanda said in a tone that suggested the opposite. "But we need to make our own traditions now. Besides, my mother is bringing her famous pumpkin cheesecake. You'll love it." The day itself was a blur of strangers in my home, none of whom seemed particularly interested in getting to know me. Amanda's mother, a polished woman with the same cool demeanor as her daughter, barely acknowledged my existence beyond a brief introduction. Her father spent most of the day watching football in the living room with his feet on my coffee table. Amanda's friends treated me like the hired help, asking me to bring more wine or where the bathroom was located. By Christmas, I was retreating more and more to my bedroom, the only space that remained truly mine. The house I had loved for decades, the home filled with memories of raising my son and loving my husband, had become foreign territory where I felt unwelcome and invisible. 6 months into our living arrangement, there was no indication that Thomas and Amanda were making any effort to find their own place. What had been presented as a temporary solution was beginning to feel permanent, but with me as the unwanted house guest rather than the homeowner. One evening in January, I overheard Amanda on the phone with a contractor discussing removing the wall between the kitchen and dining room to create an open-concept living space. "We'll need to update all the appliances, too," she was saying. "Stainless steel everything. And I'm thinking quartz countertops to replace that awful laminate." I waited until she ended the call before speaking. "Amanda, major renovations aren't something I'm comfortable with." She jumped, not having realized I was there. "Jade, you startled me. I was just getting some quotes. This kitchen is so outdated." "It may be outdated, but it works perfectly fine," I replied. "And any structural changes would need my approval, since I own the house." Her expression hardened momentarily, before shifting to a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course I was going to discuss it with you. Thomas thought you'd appreciate the update, especially since we're staying longer than expected." "How much longer?" I asked directly. "Have you been looking at properties?" Amanda waved dismissively. "The market is terrible right now. It makes more sense to wait it out. Besides, this arrangement is working so well for everyone." Was it Thomas was rarely home anymore, working increasingly long hours and traveling frequently for client meetings? When he was home, he seemed distant, distracted, constantly mediating between his wife and mother. And I had become a shadow in my own home, tiptoeing around, afraid to use the living room, when Amanda was having one of her frequent girls' nights with friends who eyed me with barely concealed impatience when I dared to pass through. I called my son at work the next day, hoping to have an honest conversation without Amanda present. "Thomas, we need to talk about the living situation. It was supposed to be temporary, but it's been 6 months, with no end in sight." His sigh was audible through the phone. "Mom, can this wait? I'm swamped with deadlines." "You're always swamped lately," I pointed out. "We barely talk anymore." "That's not fair. I'm trying to advance my career. The promotion I'm up for would mean we could afford our own place sooner." "So you are planning to move eventually?" "Of course we are," he said, but without conviction. "Look, I've got to go. We'll talk this weekend." But the weekend came and went, without any meaningful conversation. Thomas spent Saturday golfing with clients, and Sunday recovering from a headache, while Amanda monopolized the living room with a spa day for her friends. Meanwhile, my world was shrinking. I had stopped inviting my book club over because Amanda had complained about all those old ladies touching everything. My brother and his wife had visited once, but felt so uncomfortable with Amanda's cold reception that they now suggested meeting at restaurants instead. Even my garden had been partially dismantled to make room for a hot tub Amanda had delivered without consultation. My closest friend Dorothy noticed the change in me during our weekly lunch. "You've lost weight," she observed, "and you seem anxious. What's going on, Jade?" The concern in her eyes broke through my facade. For the first time, I admitted how difficult the situation had become. "I feel like a guest in my own home. Worse than a guest, an inconvenience." Dorothy's expression darkened. "That's not right. You opened your home to them out of kindness." "I know. But Thomas is so enamored with Amanda that he can't see what's happening, and I don't want to force him to choose between us." "It shouldn't be a choice," Dorothy insisted. "A good daughter-in-law would respect you and your home." The situation deteriorated further when I discovered Amanda using my mother's antique silver tea service for a gathering with her friends. These pieces were irreplaceable family heirlooms, carefully preserved for generations. "Those aren't for everyday use," I said quietly, trying not to make a scene in front of her guests. "They're very delicate and valuable." Amanda rolled her eyes. "They're just sitting in that cabinet collecting dust. What's the point of having nice things if you never use them?" Later that evening, I found one of the teacups with a chip in the rim and the silver tarnished from improper cleaning. When I showed it to Thomas, he offered to replace it with a new one. "It can't be replaced," I tried to explain. "It was my great-grandmother's. It survived 2 world wars and crossed an ocean with my ancestors." "It's just a cup, Mom," he said dismissively. "Amanda was trying to do something nice by hosting her friends here." His inability to understand cut deeply. These weren't just objects. They were physical connections to my past, to our family history. But increasingly, that history was being erased from the house, replaced by Amanda's vision of modern living. the intrusions grew bolder. Amanda began using my master bathroom because the shower pressure is better. She borrowed my car without asking when hers was in the shop. She used the last of my special face cream that had been a birthday gift from Thomas the previous year. Each incident alone seemed petty to complain about. Together, they formed a pattern of disrespect and entitlement that was impossible to ignore. The most concerning development came when I overheard Amanda and Thomas discussing their future plans late one night. "Once we have a baby, your mom will need to move to the guest house," Amanda was saying. "We'll need this whole floor for the nursery and our space." "The guest house needs renovation," Thomas replied. "It's barely more than a glorified garden shed right now. So, we'll fix it up. Your mom would be more comfortable there anyway, more independence." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart racing. The guest house was a small structure at the back of the property that Richard had used as a workshop. It had basic plumbing but no kitchen, minimal insulation, and had been used for storage since his death. The idea that I would be relegated there while Amanda and Thomas took over my home completely was shocking. What shocked me more was that Thomas didn't immediately reject the idea. His response was practical, not principled. He didn't say, "We can't displace my mother from her own home." He said, "The guest house needs renovation." I retreated to my bedroom, unable to sleep. When had my son changed so much? When had his values shifted from the ones Richard and I had worked so hard to instill? And how had I allowed this situation to progress so far without standing up for myself? The next morning I found my wedding album on the coffee table, several pages damp and sticking together. When I asked what happened, Amanda shrugged. I spilled some water while looking through it. "No big deal. Those photos are so dated anyway. You should digitize them before they deteriorate more." As I carefully separated the damaged pages, trying to salvage the black and white images of the happiest day of my life, I realized something had to change. This wasn't just about my comfort or convenience. It was about preserving my dignity and the memory of the life Richard and I had built together. The house wasn't just a structure of wood and stone. It was the repository of our family's history, the safe harbor I had promised my husband I would maintain. I had welcomed Thomas and Amanda out of love, but that love wasn't being reciprocated or respected. For the first time in months, I felt something beyond hurt and confusion. I felt anger, and with that anger came clarity. This situation couldn't continue, not without significant changes. Either Amanda would need to adjust her attitude and behavior, or different living arrangements would need to be made. The question was, how to proceed without irreparably damaging my relationship with my son. My 68th birthday arrived on a crisp April morning. In previous years, this had been a day of celebration. Thomas would take the day off work, bring flowers, and we would spend time together reminiscing and making new memories. This year, I received a hurried text message. "Happy birthday, Mom. Working late tonight. Rain check on dinner." I tried not to feel disappointed. Adult children have busy lives, careers that demand their attention. I decided to treat myself to dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant downtown, the place Richard used to take me for special occasions. The maitre d' recognized me, expressed condolences when I said I was dining alone, and gave me a quiet corner table with a candle and a complimentary glass of wine. "For the birthday lady," he said with a kind smile that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After a lovely meal and a small tiramisu with a candle that I blew out while making a wish for courage, I drove home feeling melancholy but resolved. Perhaps this birthday marked a turning point, a time to reclaim my life and my space. I pulled into my driveway at 9:30, surprised to see several unfamiliar cars parked along the street. As I approached the front door, I could hear music pulsing through the walls, laughter, the clink of glasses. A party was in full swing in my home, one I hadn't been informed about, much less invited to. I entered to find my living room transformed. Furniture pushed against walls, makeshift bar set up on my antique sideboard, at least 20 strangers, lounging on my sofa, perched on chair arms, spilling drinks on the hardwood floors Richard had so carefully maintained. The air smelled of alcohol and perfume. Amanda stood in the center of the room, wine glass in hand, holding court in a dress that seemed inappropriate for a house gathering. She faltered mid-sentence when she saw me in the doorway. "Oh, Jade, you're home early." "Early?" It was nearly 10 o'clock at night. "What's going on here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Just a little get-together for some work friends," Amanda replied, with forced brightness. "No big deal." I looked around at the chaos. Coats piled on my bed, visible through the open bedroom door, makeup bags and personal items scattered across my bathroom counter. Someone had spilled red wine on the photo albums I kept on the lowest bookshelf, the liquid seeping into pages of irreplaceable family memories. "You didn't mention you were having a party," I said. Amanda laughed a brittle sound. "I didn't think you'd mind. You're usually in bed by now anyway." A woman I didn't recognize chimed in. "Is this your mother, Amanda? She doesn't live here, does she?" Before Amanda could answer, another guest said, "I thought you and Thomas owned this place." The room quieted attention, focusing uncomfortably on our exchange. I saw something flash in Amanda's eyes, something calculating and cold. "Actually," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "this is Thomas's childhood home. We're living here while we decide what updates to make before we fully take over." I stood straighter. "Take over?" Amanda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thomas didn't tell you. We've been discussing having him buy you out so you can downsize to something more appropriate for your needs." This was the first I'd heard of any such plan. My son had never mentioned buying me out or taking over the house permanently. The property had been paid off for years. It was fully mine, with no mortgage or lien. "There must be some confusion," I said carefully. "Thomas and I haven't discussed any change in ownership." Amanda's expression hardened. "Well, it's the logical next step. You don't need all this space, and we're starting our family soon." I was aware of the guests watching this exchange with uncomfortable fascination. This was my home, my private life being discussed like a real estate transaction in front of strangers. "I think this conversation should happen privately," I suggested. "And perhaps this party has gone on long enough. It's getting late." Amanda's face flushed with anger. "Don't try to control my social life. You're the one who showed up unexpectedly." Unexpectedly. In my own home. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "See what I deal with," Amanda said to her friends. "The constant monitoring, the outdated rules. It's suffocating." I moved to the stereo and turned down the music. "I'm sorry, everyone, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave now." The room fell silent. Amanda's eyes blazed with fury and embarrassment. Then, in a voice dripping with contempt, she said the words that would change everything. "You don't belong here anymore. This is our house now." The statement hung in the air, stunning in its cruelty and presumption. Several guests looked down uncomfortable with the naked hostility. Others began gathering their belongings, sensing the party was indeed over. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The wound was too fresh, too deep. I simply turned and walked to my bedroom, closing the door behind me. Through the wood, I could hear Amanda making excuses, blaming elderly mood swings, and suggesting they continue the party at a local bar. I sat on my bed, hands trembling, and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not quiet tears of sadness, but deep, wrenching sobs of anger and betrayal. How had I allowed this to happen? How had I become so diminished in my own life? When the house finally quieted and I heard the last car pull away, I dried my eyes and opened my laptop. With shaking fingers, I began researching tenant laws in our state, my rights as a homeowner, the legal process for eviction. I had welcomed my son and his wife out of love, but that welcome had been abused beyond redemption. By morning, I had a plan. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was what I needed. For my own well-being, for my dignity, and for the memory of the home Richard and I had built together, I could no longer allow this situation to continue. The breaking point had come, and with it a terrible clarity. Either things would change dramatically, or Thomas and Amanda would need to find somewhere else to live. And based on Amanda's behavior, I suspected I knew which outcome was more likely. The morning after my birthday disaster, I called Laura, a friend who had retired from practicing family law. We met for coffee at a cafe far from my neighborhood, where there was little chance of running into Amanda or her friends. "I need advice," I said after explaining the situation. "I've reached my limit." Laura listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Jade, this is elder abuse." The term shocked me. Isn't that too strong? They haven't physically hurt me. Abuse isn't just physical. Emotional abuse, financial exploitation, taking over your space without permission, isolating you from friends and family, making you feel unwelcome in your own home. These are all forms of elder abuse. I hadn't considered it in those terms, but hearing Laura say it aloud made something click into place. The constant undermining, the gradual takeover of my home, the attempts to separate me from my support network, the discussions about relegating me to the guest house, viewed collectively, the pattern was disturbing. "What are my options?" I asked. "Legally, you're on solid ground," Laura assured me. "The house is solely in your name. There's no formal rental agreement. You've been allowing them to stay out of kindness, not obligation. You have every right to ask them to leave. And if they refuse, then formal eviction proceedings would be the next step. But let's hope it doesn't come to that." I left our meeting with a clearer understanding of my rights and a growing determination to reclaim my life. But before confronting Thomas and Amanda, I needed to strengthen myself and gather evidence. My first step was reconnecting with friends I had neglected during these difficult months. Dorothy organized a lunch with our book club members, where I was met with immediate support. "We've missed you," said Eleanor, who had been my teaching colleague for 20 years. "We knew something was wrong when you stopped hosting meetings." "I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems," I admitted. "That's what friends are for," Dorothy insisted, "to help carry each other's burdens." Their encouragement bolstered my resolve. I wasn't alone in this fight. Next, I met with my financial advisor to ensure my affairs were in order. The house was my most significant asset, and I needed to be certain that no one could challenge my ownership or control. "Everything is in your name," he confirmed after reviewing my documents. "Your late husband's will was clear, and the property transfer after his death was properly executed." At home, I began documenting incidents and property damage. I took photographs of the stained photo albums, the chipped heirloom teacup, the rearranged rooms. I started keeping a journal of interactions with Amanda, noting times when access to common areas was restricted or when disrespectful comments were made. I installed a small security camera in the living room and kitchen areas, where I had legal right to monitor activity in my own home. I didn't tell Thomas or Amanda about these cameras wanting to capture their behavior when they thought I wasn't watching. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. Amanda routinely badmouthed me to visitors, referred to my possessions as junk she planned to dispose of, and on several occasions went through my personal mail and documents. Most disturbingly, I captured a conversation between her and Thomas where she outlined a plan to gradually move me to the guest house for my own good, and then eventually to an assisted living facility, though I was in perfect health and fully independent. "Your mother is becoming forgetful," she told my son, fabricating incidents that had never occurred. "Remember how she left the stove on last week?" I had done no such thing, and the deliberate attempt to make Thomas question my competence was chilling. With support from Laura, I consulted a therapist who specialized in family conflicts. Dr. Reynolds helped me practice assertive communication techniques and prepared me for the confrontation to come. "Remember that you're not the one who created this situation," she reminded me. "You extended kindness that was taken advantage of. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish or cruel, it's necessary." After 3 weeks of preparation, I was ready. I chose a Sunday morning when both Thomas and Amanda would be home. I had asked Thomas to ensure they would be available for an important family discussion. I set up the dining room table with documents. Laura had helped me prepare a formal letter, asking them to find alternative housing within 30 days, printed screenshots of bank statements, showing they had made no effort to save for their own place, despite their substantial combined income, and photographs documenting the damage to my property and possessions. When they joined me at the table, Thomas looked concerned, Amanda defensive. "What's this about, Mom?" Thomas asked. "I need to discuss our living arrangement," I began calmly. "It's not working anymore." Amanda immediately interrupted. If this is about my birthday gathering, you're overreacting. It was just a few friends. This isn't about one incident, I continued. It's about a pattern of behavior that has made me feel unwelcome and disrespected in my own home. I slid the folder of evidence across the table. I've documented numerous instances where my property has been damaged, my privacy invaded, and my dignity undermined. Thomas looked confused as he flipped through the pages. Mom, I don't understand. If you were unhappy, why didn't you say something sooner? I've tried, Thomas, many times, but my concerns were dismissed or minimized. Amanda's face had grown increasingly flushed as she viewed the evidence. When she saw the printout of her conversation about moving me to the guest house, her eyes widened. You've been spying on us. That's illegal. Actually, I replied, steadily recording in common areas of my own home is perfectly legal. What's not legal is planning to displace someone from their property under false pretenses. Thomas looked stricken. Amanda, what is this about the guest house, about Mom being forgetful? She's never left the stove on. For the first time I saw Amanda falter, realizing she had been caught in her manipulation, but she recovered quickly. Your mother is twisting everything. She's been hostile to me from the beginning, resenting our happiness, trying to control our lives. I remained calm. Thomas, I welcomed you both with an open heart. All I asked for was mutual respect. Instead, I've been gradually pushed out of my own spaces, had my possessions damaged or disposed of, and now discover there are plans to remove me from my home entirely. Thomas turned to his wife. Is this true? Have you been saying these things about my mother? She's exaggerating, Amanda insisted. I was just brainstorming options for the future. Options that were never discussed with me, I pointed out. About my home and my life. The confrontation continued for over an hour. Amanda alternated between defensive anger and tearful victimhood. Thomas seemed genuinely shocked by much of the evidence, especially the recordings where Amanda spoke disparagingly about me when he wasn't present. Finally, I presented my ultimatum. Things need to change immediately. Complete respect for my home and belongings. No more unauthorized gatherings. No more rearranging or disposing of my possessions. And a concrete plan for moving to your own place within the next 30 days. 30 days, Amanda protested. That's impossible. We can't find and finance a place that quickly. You've had 6 months already, I reminded her. Your combined income is more than sufficient for a mortgage. The bank statements show you've been spending on luxury items instead of saving for your future home. Thomas looked pained. Mom, can we have some time to discuss this privately? Of course. Take the rest of the day. We'll talk again tomorrow. As they left the dining room, I heard Amanda hissing at Thomas. She can't dictate terms to us. This is our home, too. His response gave me a glimmer of hope. No, Amanda. It's my mother's home. She's been generous letting us stay here, and we've taken advantage of that generosity. For the first time in months, I felt like my son might be seeing the situation clearly. Whether that clarity would lead to meaningful change remained to be seen, but I had taken the first critical step toward reclaiming my life and my home. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the strength and dignity Richard would have expected of me. I was no longer willing to be a ghost in my own house, and I would not allow Amanda's disrespect to continue unchallenged. The confrontation had been difficult but necessary, and in standing up for myself, I felt more like the woman Richard had loved than I had in months. The day after our confrontation, an uncomfortable silence filled the house. Amanda left early, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. Thomas lingered over coffee, clearly wanting to talk but struggling to find the words. Mom, he finally began, I owe you an apology. I had no idea things had gotten so bad. I sat across from him, hands wrapped around my tea mug. You didn't see because you didn't want to see Thomas. He winced but nodded. You're right. I was caught in the middle and took the path of least resistance. It was easier to ask you to adapt than to confront Amanda about her behavior. That's a painful realization, I acknowledged, but an important one. Thomas rubbed his eyes tiredly. We talked for hours last night. Amanda doesn't see the situation the way you do. She feels you've been passive-aggressive, undermining her attempts to make this house a home for us. This house was already a home, I said quietly, one with history and meaning. All I asked was that those elements be respected while you stayed here temporarily. Thomas sighed heavily. Amanda suggested couples counseling. She thinks we can work through this if we all try harder. I'm willing to support your marriage, Thomas, but this isn't about your relationship. It's about boundaries and respect in my home. I understand that now, he said. I've told Amanda we need to start looking for our own place immediately. I've also suggested she stay with her sister for a few days while things cool down. It was more than I had expected, and I felt a cautious optimism. I think that's wise. Thomas reached for my hand. I'm sorry I let you down, Mom. Dad would be disappointed in me. Your father would want us to find a path forward, I assured him. He valued family above all else, but he also believed in personal accountability. That afternoon, Amanda returned briefly to pack a suitcase, avoiding eye contact with me. As she carried her bag to the car, I heard her on the phone with someone, her voice bitter. She's turned him against me completely. Playing the victim when she's been sabotaging our marriage from day one. The following week brought tentative steps toward resolution. Thomas and Amanda began attending marriage counseling. Though from Thomas's subdued demeanor, after sessions I gathered they were difficult conversations. Thomas started spending more time in the guest house, cleaning it out, making minor repairs. Just in case, he said when I asked about it. It's good to have options. I suspected he was considering it as temporary housing for himself, a middle ground between staying in the main house with me or leaving with Amanda. The thought saddened me, but I respected his need for space to sort through his conflicted loyalties. Amanda returned after 5 days at her sister's, noticeably subdued. She made small attempts at civility, asking before using kitchen appliances, keeping her belongings contained to the upstairs. But there was a coldness between us that seemed unbridgeable. I maintained my boundaries firmly but without malice. When Amanda suggested having friends over for a small dinner party, I agreed, but with clear parameters about timing, noise levels, and which areas of the house could be used. She complied, though, with obvious resentment. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Thomas announced they had an appointment with a realtor to look at condominiums in a neighboring town. It should have been a positive development, but Amanda's response was telling. I still think we're rushing this, she complained. We could save so much more if we stayed here another year. Thomas's reply surprised both of us. We've imposed on Mom's generosity long enough. It's time we established our own household. Amanda's expression darkened. Suddenly, I'm an imposition. After everything I've done to improve this dated old house, Amanda, Thomas said with unexpected firmness, we're looking at properties tomorrow. That's final. That night I overheard them arguing upstairs, Amanda's voice rising despite Thomas's attempts to quiet her. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that? Playing the fragile old lady when she's tough as nails. She just wants to keep you under her thumb. My mother opened her home to us, Thomas responded, and we've repaid her kindness with disrespect. So I'm the villain now, perfect Jade, the martyr mother-in-law against the evil young wife. How convenient. Their argument continued until Amanda stormed out again, this time taking the car keys and screeching out of the driveway. The next morning, Thomas looked exhausted but resolved. Amanda's staying at a hotel. She refused to come to the realtor appointment. I'm sorry, Thomas. This isn't what I wanted. I know, Mom, but it's forcing me to see things I've been avoiding. About Amanda. About our relationship. Over the next week, Thomas viewed several properties alone. Amanda returned to the house only to collect more of her belongings, each visit briefer than the last. From fragments of overheard conversations, I gathered she was pressuring Thomas to defy me, to insist on staying in the house, to fight what she characterized as my power play. The situation came to a head when I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Amanda. It claimed she had established tenancy rights in my home and demanded formal eviction proceedings rather than the illegal verbal eviction I had supposedly issued. I immediately contacted Laura, who reviewed the letter and laughed without humor. This is a desperate intimidation tactic. She has no case. Laura helped me draft a response that firmly established the facts. There was no rental agreement, no rent had ever been paid, The arrangement had been explicitly temporary, and as the sole property owner, I had full legal right to determine who lived in my home. When Thomas saw the legal correspondence, something seemed to break in him. I can't believe she's doing this, taking legal action against my mother. That evening, Thomas moved his essential belongings to the guest house. I need space to think, he explained. This isn't about choosing sides, it's about finding clarity. I respected his decision, painful, as it was to see my son retreating from both his wife and his mother. For the first time in decades, I was truly alone in the house. Amanda's next move was to reach out to extended family members, calling my brother and several cousins with a distorted version of events, claiming I had thrown them out without warning, that I was experiencing cognitive decline, that Thomas was concerned about my mental health. These tactics backfired when my relatives called me directly to check on my well-being and heard my side of the story. My brother Walter was particularly incensed. "That young woman has some nerve," he fumed during our call. "Trying to suggest you're incompetent when you're sharper than most people half your age." The support of family and friends sustained me through this difficult period. Dorothy and Eleanor took turns staying overnight when I felt uncomfortable alone, knowing Amanda still had a key to the house. Laura helped me change the locks, a necessary precaution given the escalating conflict. 3 weeks after moving to the guest house, Thomas asked to speak with me privately. We sat in the garden Richard had designed, surrounded by spring blooms that seemed at odds with the somber conversation. "I've made a decision, Mom," he said, his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly. "I've put a deposit on a small apartment in town. Just for me." "Just for you," I repeated. "Not for you and Amanda." He nodded. "Our marriage counselor suggested a separation. I think it's necessary. The way Amanda has handled this situation has shown me sides of her I can't reconcile with the woman I thought I married." My heart ached for my son's pain, even as I felt relieved that he was removing himself from a toxic situation. "I'm sorry, Thomas, truly." "Don't be," he said, meeting my eyes directly. "You tried to warn me in your gentle way. I wasn't ready to hear it. Sometimes we have to learn the hard lessons for ourselves." When Amanda learned of Thomas's decision to move out alone, she made one final desperate attempt to claim a stake in my home. She arrived unannounced one evening, accompanied by her parents, demanding to speak with both Thomas and me. "We've consulted with our attorney," her father announced pompously in my living room. "Amanda has established significant equity in this property through the improvements she's made and the time invested. We're prepared to negotiate a fair settlement." I remained calm, channeling the strength I had rediscovered through this ordeal. There is nothing to negotiate. This house belongs solely to me. No improvements were made with my permission, and no equity has been established by your daughter's unauthorized changes to my property. "We have documentation of expenses," Amanda's mother insisted, producing a folder of receipts, "furniture, appliances, decor, all investments in this home. Purchases made for your own comfort without my consent don't constitute investment in the property," I replied. "But you're welcome to take any items you purchased with you when you leave." Amanda's father's face reddened. "This isn't the end of this discussion. We're prepared to take legal action if necessary." Thomas, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "No, you won't, because any legal action would require documenting exactly how Amanda has behaved in my mother's home. The unauthorized changes, the damaged family heirlooms, the recorded conversations about forcing my mother out of her own house under false pretenses. Is that really what you want made public?" The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly hearing this perspective for the first time. Amanda made one last attempt, her voice breaking. "Thomas, please, we can work this out. Your mother has turned you against me, but we were happy before." "Were we?" Thomas asked quietly. "Or was I just too blind to see what was happening? Either way, I need space to figure things out. I'll be moving to my own apartment next week. You should make arrangements to collect your things before then." 3 days later, Amanda arrived with her parents and a small moving truck. They efficiently packed her belongings under my watchful eye, ensuring nothing that wasn't hers was taken. She made no further legal threats, perhaps realizing the weakness of her position, or perhaps finally accepting the consequences of her actions. As they drove away, I felt an enormous weight lift from my shoulders. My home was mine again. The road to healing my relationship with Thomas would be long, but we had taken the first steps, and I had rediscovered a strength in myself that I had forgotten existed, a resilience that would carry me forward into whatever came next. 6 months passed, bringing with them the gradual return of peace to my home and heart. The physical spaces were the easiest to reclaim. I moved furniture back to its original positions, returned family photos to their places of honor, and slowly restored the character of the home Richard and I had created together. Some changes couldn't be undone. Amanda's repainting of several rooms, her replacement of light fixtures, the garden beds she had removed for her hot tub installation. Rather than view these alterations as lingering wounds, I chose to see them as opportunities for renewal. I selected new paint colors that pleased me, installed fixtures that reflected my taste, and redesigned the garden, with Dorothy's help creating a meditation space where the hot tub had been. The emotional healing was more complex. Thomas moved into his apartment as planned, beginning a separation from Amanda that eventually led to divorce proceedings. Those first months were difficult for him, filled with self-recrimination and doubt. "I should have seen it sooner," he said during one of our weekly dinners now, a reinstated tradition. "There were signs from the beginning." "Love can blind us to reality," I replied, thinking of how Richard had always seen the best in people, sometimes to his detriment. "What matters is that you're seeing clearly now." Thomas nodded. "I keep thinking about Dad. How disappointed he would be in how I let Amanda treat you." "Your father would be proud of your courage in facing the truth," I assured him. He valued honesty above all else, even when it was painful. Gradually, Thomas began to forgive himself. He started therapy, exploring why he had been attracted to someone like Amanda and how he had allowed himself to become complicit in her disrespect toward me. The insights he gained were sometimes difficult to hear but necessary for his growth. "I was always a little jealous of your relationship with Dad," he admitted, during one particularly honest conversation. "How you two were so connected, so in tune with each other. I think part of me resented you after he died for still having all those memories with him that I'll never have." This revelation hit me hard. "Oh, Thomas, I never realized." "I didn't either, not consciously. But Amanda somehow sensed it and exploited it. Every time she criticized you, some part of me enjoyed seeing you taken down a peg. It's horrible to admit, but it's true. Rather than driving us apart, these painful truths brought us closer. For the first time since Richard's death, we were truly talking about our grief, our fears, our regrets. The facades we had maintained for each other's benefit were finally coming down." My circle of support expanded during this period of healing. My book club resumed meeting at my home, filling the living room with laughter and lively debate. Walter and his wife visited regularly from Chicago. Dorothy and I started a weekly walking group for seniors in our neighborhood, connecting me with new friends who shared similar life experiences. Laura helped me create a more formal estate plan, ensuring that my wishes for the house and other assets were clearly documented. These conversations with Thomas were difficult, but necessary. "I want you to inherit this home eventually," I told him. "But I need to know you understand its value beyond the financial." "I do, Mom," he assured me, more than ever before. Thomas's divorce from Amanda was finalized after 8 months of negotiations. She received no claim to my property, despite her initial demands. Thomas emerged financially bruised but emotionally stronger, ready to rebuild his life on a more authentic foundation. Our relationship transformed during this period. No longer was I just his mother, nor he just my son. We became friends, allies, two adults navigating life's complexities together while maintaining healthy boundaries. 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything, we held a small gathering in the backyard. Walter and his family, Dorothy and Eleanor, Laura, and her husband, and several neighbors who had supported me throughout the ordeal. It wasn't a celebration of Amanda's departure, but rather a reclaiming of community and connection. As twilight fell, and fairy lights twinkled in the trees Richard had planted decades ago, Thomas raised a glass. To Mom, he said simply, "Who taught me that true strength isn't about power or control but about knowing your own worth and standing firmly in your truth?" The toast brought tears to my eyes, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude. The journey had been painful but necessary. I had reclaimed not just my home but my voice, my boundaries, my sense of self. In the quiet moments before sleep each night, I sometimes imagine Richard beside me, his warm presence a comfort even after all these years. "You did it, Jade," I can almost hear him say. "You protected what we built together. You stood your ground." The lessons of this chapter in my life continue to unfold. I've learned that love doesn't mean surrender, that age doesn't diminish my right to respect and dignity, that speaking up for myself isn't selfish but necessary, that the home we create is a reflection of our values, our history, our very selves, and is worth protecting. To those of you watching who might be facing your own battles for respect and recognition, I hope my story offers some courage. You deserve to be valued, you deserve to be heard, and sometimes standing firm in that knowledge is the greatest act of self-love possible. If my experience resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against someone who tried to diminish your worth? How did you find the strength to set boundaries? Please, like and subscribe if this story touched you, and share it with someone who might need to. I hear that it's never too late to reclaim your power and your peace. Thank you for listening. And remember, every ending brings the possibility of a new, more authentic beginning.